Hi, my name is Marty Shankman. This is Elvis, and this is a video series entitled Elvis Does Estate Planning. Hi, I'm Marty Shankman, and this is Elvis, and this is a video series entitled Elvis Does Estate Planning. Our goal is to give you some practical, useful information on how you can best work with your estate planners to accomplish your goals. This topic or segment is on asset protection planning. I think the most important point is that asset protection planning, and let's define it and then tell you the point, is steps that you can take to protect your assets from lawsuits and claims. Asset protection planning is not only something that a physician or well-to-do doctor does because they're worried about a malpractice suit. It's frankly something virtually everybody in our country does. You probably are doing it and don't even realize it. If you have a business or you own a rental property, you probably have a limited liability company, the acronym's LLC, that owns that rental property or business. And you may not realize it, but the real reason you set up that LLC, or had a lawyer hopefully do it, is because you want to protect your assets. If you have a rental property and you own it in your own name, tenant gets hurt and they sue you, you could lose every asset you have, your house, your bank account, the works. If that rental property is owned by an LLC, technically the only thing, and it doesn't mean they won't try for more, but the only thing, you don't have to worry about lawsuits, Elvis, we'll protect you. The only thing that you really should be reached by the claimant should be the asset in the LLC. So if you have a rental property in an LLC and somebody gets hurt on that property, they should not be able to reach any of your assets other than the rental property. You want me to tell them about insurance? That doesn't mean, by the way, that you don't buy property and casualty and liability insurance. Of course you should. But there's more to it than just that. Oh boy, Elvis, you're going to go take a walk, and then you come back for the rest of the lecture, okay? Don't go far. Take notes. Asset protection planning is not about hiding assets. A lot of people misconstrue it completely and think that the idea is you're hiding assets or putting them into trust that no one can find them. That's not what it's about. It's about using appropriate legal structures that can safeguard your assets. When you engage in asset protection planning, you need to make sure that you're not violating any of the rules that could affect you, and that's why you got to do it with a lawyer and probably even with your accountant advising you as well. You don't want to commit what's called a fraudulent conveyance. You don't want to transfer assets in a manner that's defrauding an existing known or likely known, even depending on the law, claimant or creditor. You don't want to transfer so many assets out of your name that you don't have the wherewithal to live, because that clearly is questionable and inappropriate. What you want to do is take assets that you can and appropriately structure them in a way that will make it more difficult for a claimant to get at them when that occurs. And the optimal time to do asset protection planning is when you don't think you need it. If you're in the midst of a lawsuit, it's not the time to engage in this kind of planning. So asset protection planning is really for an awful lot of people. Many of you are already doing it and don't realize it. Let's go through some of the steps that you need to do. The first and most important step is practice safety. Operate and handle things in a safe and appropriate manner. If you have a house and you're leaving your kid's bicycle on the front lawn for somebody to trip over, or a hose, not smart. Fire extinguishers in your business, in your office, in your home. We're not going to go through any more, but I think you got the point. So first thing you want to do is you want to conduct yourself safely. You don't want to violate laws when you engage in this kind of planning, and you want to do it practically under the guidance of an attorney and probably even involving your accountant for some of the financial projections that are necessary. Let's go to our next slide. When you engage in asset protection planning, let's go back to the simple example we gave, because it's a very common asset protection step that a huge number of people use. You set up an LLC for your family business or a corporation or an LLC to own the rental property. Observe the formalities of the entity. If you don't observe the formalities of the entity, don't expect a court to observe them when a claimant comes after you. Let's give you an example. So you have a corporation that has a manufacturing company that your family's owned for decades, and you own it. You've never had annual minutes. You never had the stock issued. You take money out from the corporate checking account to pay for your country club golf course dues. You're using the company as if it's an incorporated pocketbook for your expenses. You're ignoring all the formalities, and now when somebody sues you, you're going to go to court and say, Your Honor, this individual can't get my home and my personal savings. We have a corporation. They should only be limited to reaching the assets of the corporation, which happen to be next to nothing. You're not going to go very far. If you haven't respected the formalities of the entity, don't expect third parties such as a court or a claimant to respect them. So what do you need to do? You should be meeting every year with your accountant, getting not only the right tax return done, but use your accountant as more than just a bean counter to do a tax return. Let your accountant advise you on how to manage and operate the financial aspects of the business, the accounting aspects of the business in the appropriate fashion. You shouldn't be making loans without documentation. You shouldn't be having distributions that don't make sense. You shouldn't have perks to family members that aren't really working there. Your accountant can help you with a lot of the issues because they have a sensitivity to it. They deal with the IRS on these issues all the time. And by the way, if your entity is handled in a manner that's proper for claimants and asset protection, it's probably also going to be handled in a manner that's much more appropriate for dealing with IRS tax issues as well. You need to consult with your attorney. Use a business corporate attorney to make sure you have annual minutes, that the governing documents, if it's a corporation, you want a shareholders agreement, an LLC, an operating agreement. You want annual minutes, bylaws if it's a corporation. You want all the formalities adhered to. Be very careful that you sign your name in the appropriate capacity. So if you've set up a corporation to handle the family manufacturing business and a contract comes in for a vendor or a supplier, don't just sign your name Jane Doe. You sign the name of the corporation, XYZ Manufacturing, Inc., by Jane Doe, President. Use the formal, correct way to sign documents so you don't inadvertently make yourself subject to a personal claim. So when you're using entities, you got to use them right. It takes a little bit of care and feeding. You got to deal with them each year. It's important to do. Life insurance trusts are a phenomenal asset protection tool. They're a phenomenal tool because it's an irrevocable trust that could hold insurance, which could be a growing asset if it's not a term policy. And it's a great way to build an asset outside of your estate that has tremendous non-asset protection motives. We have a separate video clip where we talk about planning with life insurance trust. You should consult that. It's a great tool. How you own your home is another issue to address. You need to talk to your estate planner. In some states, there's a homestead exemption, so if you own a home in, say, Florida, you may have some very valuable protection there. Other states not. In some states, if you own your house jointly with your spouse as tenants by the entirety, a special form of joint ownership between a husband and wife, the home will have a measure of protection. In other instances, it might make sense to use a qualified personal residence trust to own your home. And if that's appropriate, I have a separate video clip discussing qualified personal residence trust, or the acronym QPRT, QPRT. So there's a number of different ways you can handle home ownership to get different degrees of protection from claimants and creditors. It's something you need to work out as part of your overall plan with your advisors. Whatever you do, you need to properly care for and maintain your plan. You need to properly administer your trust. You need to respect these entities so that claimants and creditors will. You need to have appropriate insurance protection. We briefly mentioned that earlier. And you need to review and update your plan accordingly. So, to summarize, asset protection is not something esoteric that requires a foreign situs asset protection trust that only a well-to-do, I would say Wall Street financier, but we're not sure in 2009 how many of those are going to be left. But it's not necessarily just for a physician. It's really something that almost everybody that has any type of liability exposure can do, and you should do it at a level that's appropriate for your assets and your risk and the liabilities you face. You need to do it with professional advisors so you don't hurt yourself, you help yourself. If you're going to willy-nilly just transfer everything away and end up with a fraudulent conveyance, you may have accomplished actually negative, not a positive for yourself. And there's a lot of basic steps from maintaining things intelligently, operating your business safely, maintaining proper insurance, observing entity formalities that don't create a lot of cost but can be a good start to the process. So asset protection is something you should be thinking about. You should consult with your advisors and start with the basics before you get to the esoteric stuff. Thank you for joining us.